Hey, this is Ben with AWKWA, Arizona Windsurfing, Kiteboarding, and Wing Foiling Association, and welcome to the first of a series of travelogues where I take my winging and windsurfing out of the state and hopefully maybe perhaps even out of the country. And as the title card shows, the first installment we have today is the famed Hood River off of the Columbia River Gorge in beautiful Oregon in the Pacific Northwest. So in this video, I'll be doing a brief recap of how my trip went, as well as the things that I enjoyed the most about this destination, things that maybe I didn't like as much, as well as some tips and suggestions for those of you who are perhaps have never been there before and who are perhaps thinking about visiting. So I went in late July of this year. Some of you probably already know that July, statistically, anyways, seems to be the best month there, both for weather as well as for wind, which is obviously the main reason why we would want to go there. The other big factor influencing my decision was that quite a few of our local crowd here were going to be up there staying in Hood River either for the summer or for the entire month of July or even at the same time that I planned on, the same week that I planned on being there. So for me, it was sort of a no-brainer and kind of a double bonus. It would get me out of the sweltering heat of Phoenix in July, but at the same time enjoying the steadiest wind conditions of the year, as well as the warmest water and surface temperatures they have there. So as many of you probably already know, Hood River is known as the windsurfing capital of the United States. Just for those of you who don't know, it is located in the Pacific Northwest off of the Columbia River, which straddles the border between southern Washington State and the northern half of Oregon. The town of Hood River is located approximately a 1 hour's drive east of the city of Portland, which is what we flew into directly from Phoenix. With my friend Eric, we flew into Portland on that Monday, and I was on the water for my first session by 4 o'clock that afternoon, and honestly, we probably could have gotten on the water even sooner had we not first stopped by for an extended lunch at Full Sail Brewery, of course. Gear-wise, I brought all of my own stuff. I'm not sure I would do it again, but I had a very big Mystic golf quote-unquote bag, as well as I got a inflatable board for the trip, and I brought just one wing as well as one foil for the trip, basically just to kind of be self-contained and not have to rent. So now let me talk about what I liked about Hood River. There was very little I did not like. To steal or borrow, I should say, the slogan from another famous company, this is kind of the happiest place on earth. If you're into wind sports, super accessible. At least for me, it was. It was an easy flight from Sky Harbor here to PDX, maybe a hair over 2 hours, and as you can imagine, with such a major metropolis, Portland International Airport was fairly easy to get pick up our rental car, and as I mentioned previously, Hood River is just an hour drive east along a major highway that winds along the Columbia River. It's super scenic. As far as wind conditions go, wow, it lived up to its billing and then some. And in fact, it probably wasn't for most of the time I was there. It probably wasn't even as strong as it usually can get. But you know, it was pretty awesome for myself, and was certainly far better than anything we have here where we live this time of year. And so while like I mentioned, it wasn't nearly as blasting as it probably could have been. Certainly wasn't as strong as it was on some days the week before we arrived. Even on the weaker days, there was still plenty enough wind for me and my skill level. Um, Also, the predictability of the wind was really neat because it enabled me to basically get work done or whatever I had to do in my room in the mornings, and and then basically after lunch, kind of get ready, get down there, and be ready to put in time for the afternoon session when things just sort of just like I said, like almost like clockwork, usually ended up turning on. The other thing I absolutely loved about this place is just the setup areas and the rigging areas. It probably sounds funny to those of you who don't understand how really crummy and bad and inhospitable the setup and rigging areas that we have to deal with here. And as you can see in this clip, I brought my inflatable and I set it up the first afternoon in the parking lot. And on top of that, there were really nice touches like there's steel cables that are anchored and that run the depth of the lawn. I think are two of them. There might be more, but you use these steel cables to basically you can tie up your wing or your sail rig so that it won't get blown away. But honestly, it sounds kind of funny, but it's the beach area of the event site, this just riprap that I found to be absolute heaven compared to rigging areas that we have to deal with here. Even the launch area outside of what they call the hook, it's just a concrete ramp that leads down to the water. It's a little tight and narrow. You probably wouldn't want to have two wingers trying to pass or windsurfers passing one another down that ramp at the same time. But even then, the little landing or launch area, because the water is so shallow around there, was still a perfectly fine, nice area to launch from. And this brings me to my next point. This is such a great, phenomenal place for riders of all abilities. And even if you are a drop dead beginner, there are so many launch areas that are shallow and very difficult for you to get into any kind of serious trouble. Not only because of the depth of the water, but also because uh, everything downwind um, is more or less going to be caught by the sandbar that extends from basically extends into the Columbia River from just east of the event site. Um, that sandbar will pretty much act as a backstop if for pretty much anyone that kind of gets who's starting out, who maybe is not the greatest at going upwind either on say by sail or on foil. And so, provided you stay south of the tip or stay within that sandbar, you're probably not going to get into any serious trouble or require any kind of assisted rescue. You'll be able to just either, if you can't just walk in waist deep water, You can easily swim back or wade back to upwind to where you started from. So the bottom line is, as a beginner, you have both the hook to launch from and practice in, as well as the area outside the hook to launch from and practice within if you're feeling a little bit more confident and comfortable. And then you can also take it to the area in between the hook and the event site known as Lure Jensen Beach. And finally, all the way to the actual event site. The combination of the three of them will all um, be terrific for you as a beginner or progressing rider, particularly without the concern or anxiety of being blown into Idaho or wherever, but rather having the backstop of the sandbar. The other thing that I loved about the place, I knew it was a great place for a craft beer. I was very beyond pleasantly surprised at the variety and quality of the cuisine at various places that we went to during our stay for either lunch or for dinner. All right, so now let's talk about what I didn't care for about Hood River. And as you probably can guess, this list is going to be pretty darn short. Probably the biggest thing for me is that if you are planning to rent or you don't have your own gear or you just don't want to bring it with you, there just aren't a ton of really, really good options there. There are basically two that um, we were able to piece together. This is especially true for wing foiling. So in that sense, I'm very, very happy that I did bring my own board, my own foil, my own wing. Anyways, as far as rental goes, Big Winds has their rental location out by the area known as the Hook that I mentioned, and I rented a full windsurf setup on the second day there for a very, very reasonable price. However, as far as wing foiling goes, if you're hoping to rent a wing foil setup without taking a lesson, you're going to be SOL. They will rent you the board, they will rent you the wing, but they will not rent you or give you the foil. You have to take a lesson with them, which, as you might imagine, is not inexpensive. But if you're super desperate, maybe that's the option you take. And who knows? Maybe they seem to be pretty cool about it. So maybe they give you the lesson and then kind of just let you once they're comfortable with your skill level, they just kind of turn you loose and hope that you come back and return everything in one piece. But so for windsurfing, you're it's Big Winds is a great option, or just basically learning the basics of wing. For example, if you're not that comfortable yet about sailing upwind, maybe you do rent a wing from Big Winds and just play around in the hook until you get the art of going upwind kind of dialed in, and then maybe then you're ready for a foil and to get outside of the hook. The people, for those of you who do know how to wing foil and are hoping to rent, really the only other option, the only option period is to go to North Wave, which is their facility is between the Lure Jensen Beach as well as the event site. But I don't have their prices offhand, but I do recall that if you were to go a couple days renting a full setup from them, it would quickly, quickly add up. The other interesting drawback that we found was because of how late the sun stays out in the Pacific Northwest in the summer, you really easily lose track of how late in the day it is. You could easily, if it's still going, you could easily be on the water, particularly on wing foil, out for till 6:30, 7:30 easily. And so as a result, a lot of the places that you would want to grab a happy hour or get a beer at or have dinner at afterwards, straight from the beach, after your session, they're already closed. It may have been just we were there just for the weekdays. A lot of the places tended to close around 8 o'clock. Also, related to the last point, the other downside of this is that there's not a ton of nightlife in Hood River. Um, at least nightlife is, as I would probably understand it, like clubs and bars and lounges and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily a drawback for me, but for you younger guys and women out there, it might be. And finally, and this was neither an advantage or a disadvantage, really. It's just kind of a point I'll raise. Fortunately, we didn't run into any one of the number of heat waves that have afflicted the area in the past, certainly the past decade or so. And so while it wasn't a complete break from the heat, it was still, very, very pleasant. Moreover, for those of you who wonder about the water temperature, I just brought my 4.5, 3.5 ion semi-dry, and I was happy as a clam in that, if not maybe a little bit on the warm side at times. But I will say that for most normal people, anyways, even especially when the sun was out, I feel I could have easily gotten away with. Even a 3-2 or a 3-2 shorty or something like that, or even just board shorts, as honestly, a good deal of the locals were wearing. The water was just that warm and comfortable. And folks, that's my recap of my visit to Hood River, Oregon, the windsurfing capital of the United States. I hope you enjoyed this travelogue. I hope it was informative and kind of gave you maybe a little bit of insight, and maybe taught you some things that you may not have known or have yet to hear about, with respect to winging or windsurfing in Hood River. If you liked this video, sure would appreciate it if you would hit like below, as well as share this. Also, if you haven't done so already, please do consider subscribing to the AWKWA YouTube channel by hitting the subscribe button below. And you also don't want to forget to also hit the little notification bell so you can be alerted just as soon as the latest content rolls off of the presses. Until then, as always, this is Ben with AWKWA, wishing you good winds and happy sailing.